port side and disappeared that way. What we see now on the seabed is a vessel that is almost completely upside down.
The survey team records another wreck, SMS Ton Workhorse, with her control top and 12-inch guns clearly visible on the scans. Moving towards the southern end of the harbor, they launched their smaller research vessel, Limbo.
The advantage of having Limbo is its ability to get into very shallow water. This is a scan that Limbo took yesterday right on the top of the island of Farah, and what we're seeing here is a very clear groove in the stones of the seabed in this area, and we know from archival research that during the Scala, one of the German torpedo boats was saved by the Royal Navy from sinking by being hauled up right at this location.
With the help of the Limbo, Innes is able to record and produce unrivaled images of these archaeological remains.
100 years later, unseen before, we're actually seeing the marks of that still in the seabed today.
During the scuffle, the British prevented just 21 out of 50 torpedo boats from sinking. But there were also 24 giant warships here. Can Innes and his research team use their technology to locate the vessels and enhance our understanding of history? Innes and the team have now surveyed a large area of Scapa Flow and are building up a remarkable picture of what's hidden beneath the water.
When this project is finished and we've mapped the entire fleet anchorage, we will have an unprecedented, fully detailed map of the whole of the Grand Scuttle like it's never been previously seen. It's tremendously thrilling to have this technology available to us, because we can study naval events from the bottom up, instead of just being able, as in the past, to study them from the archive downwards. And putting the two together leads us to a newer truth which has been unavailable to us in the past.
So far, they've scanned the wrecks of torpedo boats and a couple of larger warships, but there are over a dozen warships still unaccounted for. After surveying more of the seafloor, they scan another large wreck. It's the light cruiser SMS Goon. Diving the wreck shows her 5.9-inch guns and crow's nest. But the survey also reveals a concerning trend.
What we're seeing is the existing warships that are left are now in an increasing state of deterioration, and it's noticeable every year that you come and look at them, that they're falling down.
On the day of the scuttle, the German crews managed to sink an incredible 52 ships.
This is an unprecedented event. An entire fleet being scuttled. The chaos, the confusion, the sheer spectacle of it all happening.
But their success came at a price.
It was quite obvious that the Huns would die to a man rather than save their ships.
The British Guards killed 9 German sailors in all. They were the final fatalities of the First World War.
This is really the last chapter of the First World War. These graves are the last visible signs of what went on here in 1919.
The surviving German crews were eventually sent home to a hero's welcome.
From the German point of view, they had saved the honor of the German Navy by scuttling their vessels rather than letting them fall into the enemy's hand. It was seen as the last successful act of defiance.
For the British, the scuttle raised some difficult questions.
The question that is always there in my mind is whether the British were in some way complicit with the German decision to actually scuttle and destroy their fleet.
Admiral Fremantle, in command of the British Navy in Scapa Flow, later records,
Minor occurrences and movements have been observed on board the German ships, which led me to suspect that some momentous action was contemplated by them.
many could see the benefits of the Germans destroying their own fleet.
I look upon the sinking of the German fleet as a real blessing. It disposes once and for all the thorny question of the redistribution of these ships.
What it meant for the British is it didn't have to give any ships to the French or to the Americans, and they didn't want to give up their superiority on the seas.
No one has ever proven that the British government was complicit, and most historians believe that a mistake, rather than collusion, is the more likely explanation. In Scapa Flow, the survey continues, examining what remains and traces of what doesn't.
The scan that we're seeing here is the top end of the German fleet anchorage, and in every case, it's clear you have the imprint of the ship now embedded forever in the seabed of the flow. Now, 7 of these wrecks are still here, but all the others are just the shadows of those former events.
These shadows are imprints of the rest of the scuttled fleet. They were some of the largest warships in the world, and now they've all but disappeared in the wake of a Herculean salvage effort. The research team at Scapa Flow is heading to what they believe is the resting place of one of the most iconic German ships scuttled here, the SMS Bayern. But this isn't your average wreck site.
Definitely see where the ship used to be. There's a big sort of dip. It's very light silt on top. Then you go down the dip and you just see more shell and shale, and so you know where it used to be. And then you just come across this massive great lump. You can see huge gearing that would have driven the turret around. It looked like a massive battery.
The Bayern was one of the brand new 28,000-ton super dreadnoughts.
Bayern and Baden are the two most powerful ships in the High Seas Fleet. These are the ships in the German fleet that have been fitted with 15-inch guns. They're the state-of-the-art monster battleships of the High Seas Fleet.
Dan has uncovered one of Bayern's massive gun turrets, but nothing else.
It's just big engineering, it's huge. Where'd the battleship go? It's crazy. To see these things just sitting there on the seabed.
Immediately after the scuttle, the British authorities had a new problem. All the wrecks near the harbor, the British Navy's key base, treacherous to navigate. Meanwhile, Highlanders looted whatever they could.
Anything on a ship that came ashore, irrespective of the legality of it, was fair game as far as they were concerned.
It's said that the boiler tubes in a lot of the German warships ended up being used as curtain rails in Orkney, so there was a little bit of a bonanza going on.
A company called Cox and Dennis embarked on a large-scale salvage operation. Ernest Cox bought up a number of the sunken vessels, determined to raise them from the seafloor. At the time, one of Scotland's top salvage experts was Ian Murray Taylor's grandfather, Thomas Mackenzie.
My grandfather was invited to become chief salvage officer to Cox. My grandfather had the technical expertise, and Cox had the money and the nerve to risk his money on this enterprise.
No one had ever attempted a salvage operation of this scale. Cox needed some heavy-duty lifting gear. He purchased a giant floating dock essentially a platform that could be moved around to access ships on the seabed.
Cox acquires this thing and has it cut in half longitudinally straight down the middle. So the two halves can be moved along over the top of one of the torpedo boats.
Once the dock was in place, divers fed wires under the sunken ship and attached the ends to winches on the two halves of the dock.
And this is a unique part. Normally, when you're using pontoons or using a floating dock as a pontoon, you tighten down the lifting wires at low tide, let the tide rise, and as the tide rises, you tow the ship into shallow water, and as soon as it grounds, you wait for the tide to fall, and you tighten up the wire ropes again, and do it in a series of tidal lifts. Cox and Danks augmented this by adding winches.
The winches were fitted with hand cranks. By turning the cranks, workers tightened the wires lifting the ships.
The vessel can be winched to the surface by a combination of lifting by the tide and lifting by the hand cranks. It's never been done before. So very inventive.
It was ingenious, but required a lot of manpower.
So at the maximum there was 60 men on each side, 120 men winding furiously, and then collapsing on the deck, being absolutely worn out.
Once raised, the wrecks were towed away and cut up for scrap. In less than 3 years, Cox and his chief salvager, Mackenzie, recovered 25 torpedo boats.
He is a genius inventor in some ways, but he's carrying out salvage acts that were considered by many to be completely possible. And they're feeling their way with new ways and means of recovering the smaller destroyers and then the larger warships all the time.
The first large warship they tackled was the SMS Hindenburg. Unlike the torpedo boats, she was too heavy to be lifted by wires and winches alone.
The Hindenburg was sunk upright, with her decks covered, and therefore the only method of raising that ship was to seal the decks, and all the openings in the deck, funnels, portholes, and of course the bottom openings in the hull, and then pump the water out.
800 custom patches were applied to make the Hindenburg watertight. Then they began pumping water out of the hull.
And that sounds quite logical and straightforward. But when they got to the ship half out of the water, they found that it kept on tilting to one side, and as they raised it further, it tilted further and further over.
To solve this problem, the ship was resunk and a new strategy was enacted. The survey is uncovering wreckage from the secondary salvage attempts. But these aren't the remains of the battlecruiser. They're separate structures, which Cox and his team built specifically for this purpose.
They made huge cement cradles, 25 feet by 30 feet, under the stern to hold the ship steady, so the ship would be resting on the stern while the bow was being pumped up and to keep the ship stable and stop it listing.
After the cement was poured and reinforced with materials salvaged from other German ships, the cradle structure was ready to support the stern of the Hindenburg, while the rest of the ship was raised up. Diving this structure also reveals a new insight into the construction of the German fleet.
You see this in museums and things. You never expect to see it in the sea, but the actual watertight spaces around the engine room on one of the Hindenburg wedges still contain the slats of wood that were in there.
Studying the wood incorporated in the cradles more closely reveals it to be cork. Being buoyant, it is an ideal material to use at sea.
The amount of cork the German Navy must have purchased and used in the construction of the high seas fleet is just beggars belief. But once the cost was nothing, the ships just had to be built in the best way possible.
Once the troubled Hindenburg recovery was underway, they set their sights on an even bigger target, and the salvagers would invent new techniques to make sure they claimed this prize. At Scapa Flow in Scotland, the Marine Survey Team is creating a detailed map indicating the remains of the scuttled German fleet, along with the imprints of the vessels that were later salvaged.
2 to 3 centimetre radius. That's just amazing.
This is like taking a photograph.
Just like that.
So the grey ones are the ones that are done, yeah? Yeah. And that's the green ones, so we are really getting there now.
1 meter there, yeah.
After a few false starts with the ongoing Hindenburg recovery efforts, Cox and his team turned to the larger ships deeper in the harbor. They hoped to raise these wrecks by pumping compressed air in, rather than pumping seawater out, which presented a new challenge. The solution was long metal cylinders that provided direct access to the wrecks from above the surface. These are known as airlocks.
An airlock is basically an underwater staircase where people can go from the surface of the sea down into 100 feet of water, totally dry, open a hatch into the bottom of the ship, and then go and do the work they're assigned to do.
The first challenge was getting them attached to the ships.
If you can imagine a long, towering metal tube swinging about at the end of a crane being lowered down onto a ship where there's a little diver waiting for this thing to come down. You've then got to fit it to the deck. Cabling has to be put out. There are lots of different ways that can go wrong.
Once the airlocks were fitted, a hole was cut in the hull of the ship, and enough air was forced in for the men to access the wreck. Then, work began inside the sunken ship.
What was required was to subdivide these large warships into smaller sections by using the existing bulkheads that were in the ship, but by making them airtight. So filling in all the holes, blocking up all the pipes, shutting all the doors.
By pumping air into each section bit by bit, they could control how the ship ascended. It was an ingenious system, but there were always risks involved.
The people on the airlocks, they were about 20 feet above the sea to start with, and then suddenly they're about 150 feet above the sea and hanging on for dear life. And there were some jocular exchanges about what the hell's the use of giving me a life jacket and then shooting me 150 feet in the air. And when they were offered a parachute, I won't repeat the reply.
And all of this was accomplished with what by modern standards was very primitive equipment.
This is the diving suit used by the divers that worked on the salvaging of the German fleet. Because you're down underwater, you have to have quite a lot of weights. Here's your breast weight at the front. There's another weight like that at the back. You've got weighted boots to keep you stable. The total of weights is about 80 kilograms, which is one hell of a lot to carry around. Look at the gloves. How would you like to do intricate work underwater wearing gloves like that? You've got to be pretty fit to do it in the first place, and you've got to be very unlikely to panic if things go wrong.
Sadly, things did occasionally go wrong. 4 men lost their lives during Cox's salvage operations. But in just 7 years, the incredible ingenuity of Cox and his team raised 32 warships from the bottom of Scapa Flow. Their work left a unique archaeological record, which Ennis is now able to see and document in incredible detail with his scanning equipment.
You've been finding masts and other small pieces of machinery. This is the German battleship Rosa-Kefest. This is a very thick foremast associated with this class of German battleship. And that's been left behind because obviously the ship has rolled over as the sunk, the mast has broken off, and it's simply been left behind. And there's been no value to the salvors, so it's survived. And 100 years later, along with the impression of where it was scuttled, we have its remains still there.
By 1931, the price of scrap metal dropped, and the Cox and Danks company called it a day. But this isn't the end of the salvaging story. Cox and Danks was bought by a company called Metal Industries, and their first target was the biggest battleship of them all. Ennis and the team are nearing the end of their survey of Scapa Flow. They've recorded the wrecks of some of the scuttled German fleet in incredible detail, and are also constructing a unique picture of what happened to the ships that are no longer here.
The multi-beam that we've been doing in the fleet anchorage is showing us the locations of all the major warships that were sculled in 1919. And even the ones that are taken away have left a 100-year-long mark in the seabed that we can very clearly see. And what I've got here is a bayon that was recovered. In one small picture, we've got the scuttle and the post-scuttling salvage activity together.
In 1933, metal industries took on the challenge of raising the byre. But the scan suggests that it didn't go according to plan.
And so what we have in this particular case is not only the impression of where the bayon was scuttled, we also have, when it was recovered, the turrets fell out. And they're very, very obvious.
When the salvagers tried raising the byre, a pipe burst, and she shot to the surface. Her gun turrets remained lodged in the seafloor. They reset the byre to try again, bringing the second imprint so visible on the scan.
It's left this remarkable legacy behind. The turrets, which are a fantastic dive site, visited by a lot of the recreational divers that come to Orkney, are mightily impressive.
Despite the rocky start, metal industries kept salvaging and soon raised another 4 battleships.
The salvage activity went on right up to the beginning of the Second World War, when the last battlecruiser Der Flinger was raised, and it actually spent World War II here, where we are, very close to where we are right now, upside down.
You could open the door into the hull of the ship, which is in the bottom of the ship, and you then climb down inside. I went out as a small boy, and I was allowed to do this, and it was fascinating to be down inside this great ship. The whole thing was covered in rust. The air was a little bit sort of musty. It was just an eerie experience.
In total, an incredible 38 vessels were salvaged from the bottom of Scapa Flow.
My grandfather would be quite proud, because after Cox left the scene, he was in sole charge of the whole operation. In terms of marine salvage, nothing's ever approached it. And when you consider that initially people said they wouldn't raise a single ship.
It was the most extraordinary salvage operation we've ever seen. Almost 400,000 tons of steel was brought back up from the flow. It was an incredible accomplishment.
After being here a week, Innes and the team are nearing the end of their survey.
We've scanned somewhere around about 27 square kilometres, and working night and day, but one night affected by bad weather. We've got a few corners that need to be filled in by limbo, but we've mapped the entire area of the scuttling and the subsequent salvage. It's evident from what we've seen that the seabed is replete with evidence of what went on here 100 years ago.
The data collected has allowed Innes to produce the most detailed, accurate map of exactly what remains of the German high seas fleet in Scapa Flow.
I think it's been an extraordinary week on a number of fronts. I mean, first and foremost, the most important thing that we've done is really Innes's work on doing the most complete survey of the flow that's ever been done. And that will be fantastic for future archaeology and for the protection of these wrecks, or what's left of them.
The scuttle and salvage of the German fleet is one of the most compelling stories in maritime history. 100 years on, through technology and tenacity, Innes and his colleagues have ensured that what happened on and under these famous waters will be studied and understood for at least another century. two distinct bodies of water, divers explore the wrecks of stricken naval ships, searching to understand why two of history's greatest seaborne missions failed,
For young guys, they would have been terrified. They can only have been terrified.
and what decisions sent hundreds of men to the bottom of the sea.
There's no time to rescue. There's no time to do anything.
3 million shipwrecks lost in the depths of the ocean.
There's the bow. Wow, she's pretty.
Each a time capsule, hiding stories of adventure, innovation,
The number of holes at that wreck is quite remarkable.
courage, and tragedy.
We're talking about the deaths of 10,000 people.
Now the hunt is on to find the ships, unlock their secrets,
Imagine being in a haunted house with a small flashlight.
Then I lost my hold inside. There was a terrible crash of the vessels. I was the only one to come back.
Others sank to the bottom.
and hear their voices once again. Off the stormy western coast of Ireland in 2015, a team of divers in Streeta Bay investigates some mysterious wreckage.
It's after the storms that you get a movement of sand, and so sometimes artifacts have come up on the beach. Anytime there's a big storm, we come down and snorkel or dive.
Local legend claims that hundreds of lives were lost here as the result of a catastrophic shipwreck. Could these modern-day findings support this centuries-old disaster story? The site draws so much attention that Ireland's archaeological agency, the National Monument Service, decides to investigate.
We had this expectation that there was material out there that was being, I suppose, freed from the seabed and being washed in, but as to what was the nature and extent of that, we didn't know.
They head out to dive the site to examine the wreckage.
The nature of the bay here is that under true tidal conditions, if you don't have enough weight on you, you will be turned around like you're in a washing machine.
Push the bail out. Free flow. Okay, dial the breath. 9. Okay, just watch your umbilicals there.
It's a complicated dive, but it produces remarkable results.
The dive tool all stop. Just put your pneumo on the seabed, over.
Leading the expedition is senior archaeologist Finbar Moore.
The last 20 years or so, we've built up an archive of about 18,000 shipwrecks around the coast. And we've undertaken a number of excavations and surveys over the years to record and protect and to manage the more vulnerable wreck sites around the coast.
The importance of the site reaches far beyond the borders of Ireland. The storms have uncovered the remains of not one, but 3 wooden ships.
They were spread over a large area, measuring about 60 by 40 meters. It's a scatter of material, really, rather than some ships sitting proud of the seabed.
And in the wreckage, vital clues.
Yeah, you happy with that, Jimmy?
There's a good complement of ordnance there. From the munitions and the smaller armaments, like the cannonballs, there is a huge spread of those there as well. Different types, stone and iron, and different sizes.
The cannons and cannonballs are evidence that these are fighting ships from a long-lost era. And, etched into one gun, the team finds another clue. The date it was made, 1570. This date, and the local legends, confirm an exciting possibility. The ships may have been part of one of the greatest military conflicts of all time, the defeat of the Spanish Armada.
I'm driving 30 years, and in my lifetime, I never thought I would see anything from the Armada.
In May 1588, after 2 years of planning, King Philip II of Spain launched his formidable fleet of 130 warships under the command of the Duke of Medina Sidonia. The Spanish called it the Grande y Felicissima Armada. It was a wonder of the age, its mission to invade and overthrow the English regime.
Spain was the greatest empire in the world, and when the English started challenging the Spanish, both religiously and also in terms of supporting rebel parts of Europe, Spain wanted to do something about it.
For years, the English had been executing raids on the treasure ships of Catholic Spain, raids sanctioned and partly financed by the Protestant Queen, Elizabeth I.
England was a major nuisance. For ideological, political, and economic reasons, a nuisance that had to be dealt with.
The fleet headed for England, intent on bringing it under Spanish rule. Could these ships be remnants of their armada, hundreds of miles off course from their target? In Street Bay, Finbar Moore confirms the identity of one of the ships from a recovered cannon.
It had the image of Saint Matrona inscribed on it. Matrona is a saint venerated very much to this day in Barcelona.
The archaeologists are certain of the ship's identity. She is called La Juliana, and she was built on the coast near Barcelona in 1570. Requisitioned by King Philip of Spain in 1586, records tell us that La Juliana was lost alongside 2 other merchant ships. The Venetian merchantman, La Lavia, and the Santa Maria de Dison, built in Dubrovnik. They weren't from Spain, so what were they doing in Philip's fleet?
It shows the extent, A, of Spanish need, requirement that they had to get these ships from overseas, quite literally.
King Philip's ambitions were so extensive that his own ships weren't enough to execute his plans. He acquired already existing ships that he deemed armada-worthy.
Spanish power was such that in Sicily or in Lisbon, if you saw a ship that was suitable for the armada, you took it over.
Neither La Juliana nor the 2 ships wrecked alongside her were built for war.
We know it was built as a merchant vessel, mainly supplying grain to Sicily and Naples, and bringing grain back across the Mediterranean as well.
So, what were Mediterranean merchant ships built to transport cargo doing in a military fleet?
They were commandeered mainly as naval auxiliary ships for supply of provisions, or as troop ships to ferry troops from A to B.
The 3 ships were part of the Levant Squadron, one of 10 armada squadrons mainly equipped with large cargo vessels from across the Mediterranean. Compared to the fighting galleons in the fleet, they have some serious weaknesses. As Francisco de Cuellar, an armada captain, noted,
she opened so much with a storm, which sprang up that she continually filled with water, and we could not dry her out with the pumps. We had neither remedy nor succor, except it was from God.
The military ships were galleons, more seaworthy and better armed. The merchant ships were mostly carracks, or as the Spanish called them nauts. They were less seaworthy, and they paid the price.
Okay, but I saw you wait out. When you saw you wait out, let me know.
The team at Street Bay realizes they are looking at a treasure trove of Spanish wreckage and an impressive number of armada cannons.
I think on the first, if I can remember, there were 5. Later on in that week, they found another one separate, which was the largest one. Maybe 8, 9 foot long. It was incredible.
As the cannons are already exposed, the team decides to raise them, rather than risk damage by the waves and shifting sands.
Okay, sorry, diver 2, you need to lift the cannon a bit more, over. On diver 1, slack.
Look, they're stuck on the end of it. Some of the guns have shown distinct signs of abrasion and wear over time from being washed by the sea and the sand particularly, but the majority of the guns are in really, really pristine condition.
In total, they transferred 9 guns, all from La Juliana to dry land, the largest collection of bronze cannons ever recovered from a single Armada wreck.
It was just amazing. It was very emotional, and it was stunning to see the detail of the cannons that I didn't think we'd be on it after 427 years, so I just didn't think we'd see that. It just kind of blew our minds, really, to be honest.
La Juliana's arsenal is evidence of the awesome power carried by the Spanish Armada and provides clues as to how it was supposed to be deployed against the English. At the National Museum of Ireland in Dublin, La Juliana's guns are undergoing conservation. They are kept in water to limit further corrosion.
In the tanks here now, we have the guns that were recovered in 2015 in these 2 tanks by the Underwater Archaeology Unit.
La Juliana was loaded with an array of different guns.
They had longer range guns and then more close range guns, and they would have been deployed around the ship and used depending on what threat arose.
Although built as a cargo ship, she was heavily armed and prepared to do battle.
The shorter ones, the falconets, for more close quarter combat. They would have had lethal capacity to inflict lethal damage on any ship that would have come close to them.
In July 1588, King Philip's Armada approached its target, the southern coast of England, in a tight defensive formation. The less powerful navy of Queen Elizabeth sailed out to meet it.
The galleon San Pedro, in which I sailed, received much injury from many heavy cannonballs, which the enemy lodged in her various parts. And although they were repaired as well as possible at the time, there were still some hidden shot holes through which much water entered.
The English stayed out of range of the Spanish ships and tried to bombard the invading fleet with their longer-range guns. But the Armada escaped intact, and the Levant ships remained protected by the powerful galleons. The Armada persevered, still a formidable threat. Other evidence found off the coast indicates just how daunting the Spanish threat was. The divers find carriage wheels designed for transporting siege guns.
The siege carriage wheels are substantial wheels to carry the sheer weight of these siege guns. They would have been broken up or dismantled and in the hold of the ship. The carriage guns and the siege guns that were really to be reassembled when they got to the coast of Kent.
And among the collection of guns from La Juliana is one that would have been carried on this siege train.
We have this gun here, which is beautifully embellished with flame-like patterns. It also has 2 magnificent lifting dolphins. It's a large gun. It's what they call a demi-cannon de batterie. The idea was that this would be mounted on the gun carriage and wheeled across land and used in taking out defences around towns in England as the Spanish army moved towards London.
If the Spanish reached the coast, England would be lost.
It carries 18,000 soldiers. It carries 2,500 guns. And given the state of the